Today's episode is brought to you in association with Shoes for Cruise. Since 1984, Shoes for Cruise has been the industry standard in slip resistance and safety footwear solutions, helping more than 150,000 companies around the world. Its mission is to keep the workforce safe on the job with comfortable, quality protective footwear solutions, reducing accidents and saving money. For more information, visit www.shoesforcruise.com. Hello and welcome to the Inspiring Industry podcast, where we discuss our conversations with leaders from industries across the globe. I'm your host, Danielle Champ, and this week we are taking a look at the impact of electric vehicles and their future in the green transition. To keep up with news happening in your industry, visit our website or follow us on LinkedIn. Those links can be found in the show notes, and if you like what you hear, why not subscribe and leave us a review. Here's what you can expect in this episode.
The inner circle has become way bigger. Electrification is a kind of the unsung hero of everything we do.
We think climate change could be one of the biggest drivers of the public transport industry in terms of growth in the future. We just need to keep hammering home the message about the importance of giving buses priority in urban areas.
Complexity of vehicles is shifting from mechanical into software. We're trying to make the world a little bit of a better place, and that's what gets us up in the morning, certainly what gets me up in the morning.
Before we begin, a quick disclaimer for the sound of my voice. The Fine Light team has been hit with every strain of winter cold possible, and unfortunately this last did not come out unscathed, so please bear with. We have a ton to unpack in this episode. The world of electrification has been an ever-evolving one, and the pace has picked up quite significantly over the last few years. So to kick us off, our assistant editor, Mary Floate, spoke with the president of electrification at ABB, Morten Wierod. Morten shares his reflections on the significance of electric vehicles and how the changing technology is going to serve as such a prominent platform for the green transition across the globe.
I've been engaged and committed to energy efficiency, about making life and societies better with better electrical solutions for my entire career. But the last 3-4 years has really changed. I feel like the rest of the world are now having the same understanding as we have in ABB. The inner circle has become way bigger. That we are now, people are concerned about, we saw that first with COVID, that electrification and the importance of having stable electricity supplies, to breathing machines at hospitals, to clean water for all that in society in general. These are the very basic needs of people that it suddenly got a completely different attention. And later on last year, when we had the war in Ukraine, and then seeing also the importance where energy becomes not just something for the electrical engineers, but it becomes top of the agenda and even become part of national security. No, so I think why I like about our business is that, as I say, it does answer a lot of the bigger questions we have today about how we can continue with a good quality of life without consuming the earth. And their electrification. We talk a lot about sustainability, and when the question is, how do we get a more sustainable future, you will hear in that answer, electrification is kind of coming as that's a thread and trend that is coming, into the answer. So that is why I'm very passionate, and I know my whole team is very passionate. We have 110,000 people in ABB is really working to make a more sustainable future, and that's. And I can feel that also in the engagement, which I think we measure that on an annual basis. We've seen that has improved over the years because people feel that what we do matters. And I think looking at electrification, it's a kind of the unsung hero of kind of everything we do. We don't think about it on a daily basis. We only think about it when it's gone. So when it doesn't work, so we take it for granted. But it's our whole from power utility network and how the whole electric system is built. In this mesh of fine networks and how it all fits together. When you know a bit more of the technical details, it's quite impressive. I would say, even beautiful. How you balance demand and supply. This is electrical network where you cannot really store. Okay, you can today at very small portions with battery systems, but in general, energy and the whole network is you need to balance demand and supply. So what you put in has to be taken out. That's no so. This is a fine balanced system that is, but could also be very fragile. Our job is to make it more stable and make it so that we have electricity available all the time. And then so a lot of this balancing is what we are working on, that people will not be afraid that they will be without power, that it is enough. And then, of course, the next question is, do we have being generated in the right way, which takes a significant part of our time is making the green transition possible. Another challenge, what you will have here is around grid stability. And this is when the flip side of the coin of wind and solar, and when we do a lot of this green transition, there will be more need for grid stability, because today you get that due to some of the large power plants we have in the network. As we disconnect more of the coal-powered power plant, and these are strong power generators that makes the power network stiff and solid. And when you disconnect it and you have the same energy coming from solar, you're missing this kind of this stability, and it makes us more vulnerable. So also grid stability is an area where we'll have to see large investments, for instance, in synchronous condensers, also from ABB, that we are able here to get that mechanical stability of the power grid. This is a challenge that we will see. We see it already in many countries, in UK, for instance, where you have now a lot of getting more and more offshore wind parks, and getting that connected to the power grid. You also need more inertia in the power network. So here this is not going to affect, or it's not going to be seen from a consumer point of view, but this is high on the agenda for a power utility, because in the end, if this fails, you will have more of a domino effect, and all consumers will be without power. So that's why it's important to get it corrected. So these are some of the when you're talking about the electric network and some of the challenges we face. The good news, we have the technology at hand, so I'm not really worried. It will require investment. It will require that we do it in time and with the right time. But the technology is available, so it's not like we have to wait or delay take any actions. We have the technology already at hand, but it's more of using it and implementing it.
Morten's overview is enlightening for two reasons. Firstly, when we think about electrification, it tends to be within a first world context. And I think this negates the practicality electrification has in developing countries like South Africa, for example, where the national grid has been captured, resulting in a massive electricity shortage. Not only that, but as Morten mentions, grid stability is a reminder of how fragile the energy infrastructure is at the moment, especially in Europe following the Ukrainian war. Secondly, and I suppose as a counter to the previous point, I loved his sentiment that electrification offers a better quality of life without consuming the earth. In this light, there is impressive potential for electrification to make a difference in how we travel, how we live, and how we give back to the planet. On that note, we also had the pleasure of speaking with the managing director at Go Ahead Group. Martin Dean, about how the UK bus company is implementing electric buses on routes across the country. In his conversation with Fine Light's Alex Cesare, he begins by discussing hydrogen buses and how they're being received by passengers using the service. Over to Martin.
So with the hydrogen buses, we've got 20 hydrogen fuel cell buses. They're being built for us by Wrightbus, and they're starting to come through. So that's really good. We'll be looking to get those operating from the springtime from our Crawley depot. They're single-deck GB Kite Hydroliner buses, to give them their exact specification. And we've also got the possibility of a second tranche of a further 34 buses to operate other services on our Fastway network in and around Crawley and Gatwick Airport, and then northwards into East Surrey. And that's a network of guided busways and dedicated bus lanes, which are designed to speed buses past congestion hotspots. It's been a network that we've run for a number of years now in partnership with West Sussex County Council, Surrey County Council and Gatwick Airport. And it's done really, really well in terms of developing bus services in that part of the world. It's used an awful lot by people that work at the airport. And the reason that we've got hydrogen buses on that is because the vehicles are out. It's a 24-hour service, 7 days a week. So the requirements of the vehicle are quite stringent. You know, we've got vehicles that are running up to 317 miles a day before they go back into the garage. And so in terms of the range comparison with battery electric, we need something which has got the same sort of capabilities as diesel with the environmental benefits. So that's why we've gone for hydrogen in this particular instance. And we'll be really interested to see how they perform in regular service. It's that the first examples we'll have of hydrogen vehicles running for us. So we're looking forward to getting them in and seeing how they perform.
Were there any other, wider sustainability motivations for the company or other green initiatives that you'd like to touch upon or highlight?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key thing is that the reason that we want to promote the whole sort of concept of greater sustainability is that obviously it's good for us in terms of business, but there is a wider benefit to the economy and society in general. We think climate change can be one of the biggest drivers of the public transport industry in terms of growth in the future. According to the Climate Change Committee, around 9 to 12% of car mileage must be shifted to walking, cycling or public transport by 2035, and 17% by 2050. And that's a big number when you look at the amount of private vehicle trips compared to public transport trips at the moment. And if we just got 1%, that would be absolutely huge in terms of growing our passenger numbers. But if the requirement is sort of 9 to 12% by 2035 and 17% by 2050, if we can show to be part of that climate change revolution and getting some of that transferred to us, then it's good for the economy in general. It's good for the climate, and it's good for us financially. So I mean, we're looking to. As I said, we're the largest operator of ZEBs in the UK, and our target is to have a fully zero-emission fleet by 2035.
Fantastic. And with those percentages of people transitioning towards public transport, that must be a potentially radical upscaling of your infrastructure and your operations.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the government's in step with that because we had the National Bus Strategy in 2021, which was the first time we had a modal strategy for bus in many, many years, and we certainly welcome that as Go Ahead Group, and the ambition there is really broad, which is great to see, and we need to work with central and local government to make sure we implement some of the objectives and the outcomes that strategy is looking to see. But you're right, it would be a step change because it would result in a huge increase in the demand for public transport. But we're certainly up for that. We really are up for it. We're bouncing back pretty well from the pandemic and the impacts of that. And we're convinced that if you give people quality bus services, then the growth is there.
Picking up on that point, how are you encouraging more people to use public transport, especially after the pandemic? I suppose this question's tapping into the wider issue of the public transport sector can up its sustainability game all at once. However, if people are still opting for personal means of travel with cars, etc., then we're still stuck with the same environmental problem that we began with.
Yeah, well, I think in terms of changing perceptions, one of the things that we need to do, which is why the £2 fare cap is so important in terms of generating the right sort of publicity, is once we get people travelling back on buses, I think there'll be, I would hope they'll be happy with their experience, and that means that once they sort of cross that threshold of travelling again, then they'll be happy about travelling. And we need to give them a reason to travel as well. We've done an awful lot in terms of £2 fare cap's going to be great, but we've done a lot of other things to try to get people to travel more. So we've had things like discount schemes in the evening, just to encourage people to travel more in the evenings and get the nighttime economy going. Only on Christmas Day, we ran some bus services on Christmas Day. The first time in Brighton, we run buses on Christmas Day in the Isle of Wight and in Bournemouth, Christchurch, Poole. So it's not new, but we've added to that, and the reaction to that was really, really good. We intensified the number of services, and we had more passengers on Boxing Day in Brighton than we've had before. So that that's good too. So all the time we're trying to just see what we can do to really encourage our passengers, give them reasons to travel. Really, that's what we really need to do, is give them reasons to travel. Be that location, time of day of use, or just some of the the fares initiatives that we've got. We've one of the other things that we've done in a number of our companies is we've introduced touch on, touch off, which is this idea that the back office calculates your best value journey rather than you having to decide before you travel. So when you travel around on our services, either for a day or for a week, our back office system will work out what the best fare combination is for you, and that that's something which is growing all the time. So that's good, and we want word to get around there that there's really, really good value available. In addition to the £2 fare cap, which is only as we speak at the moment a 3-month offer. So I think there's lots of things that we're really trying to do there.
Fantastic. Well, that's the end of all my questions. Is there anything else that you'd like to add that we might not have covered in our chat?
I think just the thing that we talked about, sustainable transport, mode shift, mode switching, all that sort of stuff. We just need to keep hammering home the message about the importance of giving buses priority in urban areas, and that can be physical measures like bus lanes, but there are other things that are being done in some really innovative locations, such as in Oxford, where there's a plan to put in effect gates which prevent traffic which shouldn't be in the city centre and should be on the bypass from going through the city centre. And I think this is a really innovative traffic management measure which we're hoping will significantly reduce journey times by increasing journey speeds for buses, hopefully by as much as 10%. And if that happens, then I think we can really improve the punctuality of bus services and the reliability of bus services, and that gives us a fantastic opportunity to get people using buses that aren't using them at the moment. And that as we talked about earlier on in the interview, that's a huge opportunity for us, but it should also help to deliver national and local government policy objectives in terms of the environment. So anything that we can do in terms of traffic management measures which give buses an advantage over other traffic flow, I think will be hugely important going forward. And we would call on highway authorities everywhere to do things that are as radical as possible.
From what we're hearing, electrification has its pros and cons. In the case of electric vehicles, and from what we hear from Martin, the biggest advantage is the cost efficiency it offers by, firstly, minimizing the expense of fuel, and secondly, by decreasing the number of cars out on the road, especially in urban dense areas where companies like Go Ahead Group tend to operate. However, the con which I think is a topic that isn't as widely discussed, is cobalt mining. Cobalt, the bluish-white metal, is predominantly used in lithium-ion batteries. As it stands, the metal is primarily extracted in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where there have been questions of mining malpractices. I think that as customers are becoming more attuned to the ethicality of the products they purchase and the companies they support, it is so important for electric vehicle manufacturers to be aware of the impact that electrification has and the footprint that their global network leaves behind. Our final conversation is with Jim Castelaz, the Chief Technology Officer and founder of Motiv Power Systems, a business which manufactures zero-emissions trucks. He shares how technology in the automotive industry will help revolutionize the sector's contribution to a greener and more sustainable world. Over to Jim.
I'm a Sparky by training, an electrical engineer, and I was studying at Stanford University here in the Bay Area many years ago. I guess it was that 2006 through 8. And a couple of things struck me at that time. One was, some fellow Stanford students were from the solar car team were working on a startup called Tesla, right, electrifying passenger cars. So it was kind of an interesting time in electric vehicles very early on. And I guess there were a couple of things that I kind of, when I started Motiv, it was kind of the intersection of two insights. The first was one that I gained from a talk I heard by one of the Tesla co-founders. And it was about how complexity of vehicles is shifting from mechanical into software. Right? And electric vehicles are just one way that that's happening, but it's one very salient way. Right? If you look at an electric vehicle, there aren't that many moving parts compared to an internal combustion vehicle. But it doesn't mean it's not complex. It's just the complexity is in the software, right? And so kind of thinking through that and then thinking through the commercial vehicle, the truck and bus space, and the capabilities that existed in that industry, I would say it was and maybe still is a little light on software capability, right? And so I started Motiv kind of thinking that we could help solve that problem, right? We could provide the software, power electronics, and controls for electrifying these medium-duty commercial vehicles. And so I started Motiv in 2009 to do that, with our mission to free fleets from fossil fuel. It's a good industry, I think, to be in. A lot of people that are drawn to electric vehicles, I find, are working there because they really believe, at least in Motiv's case, they really believe in the mission and the larger good that we're doing, right? When we're freeing fleets from fossil fuel, the idea that we're introducing a kind of level of energy freedom, right, to these companies that are kind of the backbone of our economy, moving goods and people around. And they've been so critically reliant on fossil fuel for decades, right? It's like built into their business. And to tell them, hey, how about your trucks run on sunshine instead? And you can capture that on the roof of your building, right? We can integrate this whole energy system. Well, the key enabler of that, what creates that freedom is being able to electrify these vehicles and create energy independence there. So, so I like doing that. A story I sometimes tell is from my 9-year-old. He was 6 at the time, but we were talking and he asked kind of, well, why do you need to work so much, right? And anyone who has kids recognizes that, like, if you're going to spend your time not with your family, it better be for a good reason. You better be doing something worthwhile, right? And so I thought, well, it's a valid question he's asking me. So a truck drove by. And I said, you see that truck? Like, I'm working to make those cleaner. And he said, okay, I guess that's okay. And then he kind of thought, he said, so do you work at a car wash? And I said, well, it's not quite a car wash. I had to kind of clarify what I meant by cleaner. But I guess the idea, that I want to say there is I think people at Motiv and in our industry generally, like, really are doing it because we're trying to make the world a little bit of a better place. And that's what gets us up in the morning, certainly what gets me up in the morning. We're deeply passionate about our vision of freeing fleets from fossil fuels. Individually and as a company, something we all strive for. We do it with curiosity, though. We kind of have to twist that in and see how things work, how they break, how we can make them better. And it's something that we do not just for its own sake, but with a focus towards our customers. So really keeping an eye on making real solutions solutions, solving real problems. And then, the fourth element is to do it collaboratively, right? I think we realized as a company, we're best as a team that's more than the sum of individuals.
Talked a little bit about Motiv's service offering. I didn't know whether you wanted to go into a bit more detail, but also perhaps highlight what you think makes the company stand out from its competitors. You're obviously operating within a niche within the electrified vehicle space. So yeah, what separates Motiv from the rest?
The thing that we do really well are applications, truck and bus applications, where the need is to move more than 2 tons of payload. Right? If you only need to move 1,000 pounds, we kind of say, well, that's pretty easy, and not to trivialize it. It's not that it's easiest. The technology stack is more kind of developed, more mature in the marketplace, right? And so you've got the likes of Rivian, BrightDrop, Ford, the E-Transit, and others that can give you a pretty good product if you need to move 1,000 pounds around, right? Or like passenger car scale, or maybe a little more than passenger car scale with like a small van. But if you need to move 2,000 pounds of payload, you really are looking at a technology stack that's kind of a step up on power level, right? And so your options for doing that while being purely electrified are a little more limited. The market's not quite as mature, and that's the market where Motiv is kind of leading the way. Up to kind of that cutoff in the U.S. for a commercial driver's license at 26,000 pounds, like a 13-ton vehicle, gross vehicle weight rating. And above that, you get more into long haul, and then you have more infrastructure challenges, really, because your drive cycles look different. But for that medium duty space, kind of 2 tons of payload up to what would be known as Class 6 or commercial driver's license cutoff. That's really where we excel, and I think I would say we have the leading technology stack for that particular weight class. And the way that we do that is we leverage the lower weight, lower costs, more reliable technology used on the passenger car side. And then we've built a patent portfolio and technology to extend it up to these heavier weights. So we operate at, like, for example, at 400 volt nominal system voltage, where a lot of medium duty trucks, you see them, they're basically downclassed Class 8, or downclassed transit bus running at these higher voltages, much more expensive solution. Right. And then they just kind of detune it a little bit for medium duty. And that works, but it's just not nearly as cost effective as if you can take the lower cost technology base and extend it up. And so, so that's what we do really well. And we deliver, kind of category leading performance at that 400 volts, which means now you're much more compatible with DC fast charge. And you're using much lower cost, more reliable parts throughout the vehicle. And so that's something that I think really kind of makes us stand apart. And if you look at kind of where we invest our energy around patents and intellectual property and software and that, it's kind of in that realm.
And looking at the year ahead, how will production rates change this year? Are you making any investments or machinery upgrades that you could tell us about that might have impacted that?
Yeah, so right now our production capacity is about 2,000 vehicles per year. We probably won't hit that till 2024. We've seen enough instances in the industry where there's some kind of marquee announcement about some 10,000 unit order, or whatever, multiple thousand unit order, and then there's no more announcements for a few years, right? And you're like, well, what happened to that, right? And I think we encourage our customers to kind of grow at the right rate for their business. They have to pilot these vehicles. They have to learn about the operational impacts of needing to plug them in overnight, for example, right? And sometimes that means infrastructure upgrades. It's not typically as big of a deal as you see in long haul trucking, where we're talking megawatts everywhere you want to put a truck, right? It's a lot of times you don't really need a building facility upgrade on your power side. Like, you can use the same power meter, you just need some electrical work. But even that takes time. Right. And so fleets are they've got some big challenges ahead of them to electrify, whether because of sustainability mandates at the corporate level or because of rulemaking in California and other jurisdictions that are requiring switch to zero emissions, just looking at the cost savings of moving to zero emissions, right? And so a lot of fleets have very aggressive plans, and we help them get there. And we're ramping our manufacturing to ensure that we're ramping with their growth rates. And so we'll probably do something like triple our production output in 2023.
Looking ahead, maybe if you wanted to just reflect or give us some thoughts about how you see the future of EVs.
Yeah, so I think we're at a really interesting time in the EV market, and it's kind of this confluence of there's enough progress in the market for the regulators to feel empowered to make regulation that actually is impactful. And we look at like the federal, tax credit IRA in the US that is providing, big incentives for our vehicles, $40,000 tax credit pretty much, and some of the other state incentive programs. And when you couple that in with corporate sustainability goals, you wind up with an environment where it's very attractive to buy electric commercial vehicles. And I think an environment where we're rapidly shifting into being supply constrained on our ability to produce these vehicles. And we've seen a little bit of that in the last 2 years with some kind of odd supply chain issues that have affected all of the automotive world and beyond, actually. But I think just looking at the production capacity for medium duty trucks in the US and what the demand is going to be for the next 5 years, and I think it looks to me pretty likely that we're going to be production constrained, even with Motiv and other companies growing as fast as they can. And so that's going to be an interesting world. It's going to be an interesting dynamic and shift. And so Motiv's strategy is again focused on making sure that we're able to serve our fleet customers and grow with them. And a key part of that is making sure that we know what their plans are and doing some long-term planning with them, right? Because if they've got to electrify 50% of their fleet by 2027 or 50% of their fleet by 2030, which are common goals that we've heard, frankly, these are big numbers, right? And they got to start planning now. They've got to start placing orders now because otherwise there's not going to be any room in the production queue. And then kind of more broadly, I think I kind of touched on that a little bit. It's a pretty exciting time and regulations are driving a lot. I think, and it's not even just the direct regulation. It's like, if you know that there's a mandate for electric in 2030, the usable life of a brand new diesel truck that you buy today is 7 years tops, right? It's not 10 anymore, right? And so that changes the economics a lot too. So I think fleets are starting to understand this, and it's driving purchasing decisions, and is going to take us to a place where in 5 years, I think it's reasonable to expect that a lot of people and goods are going to be delivered with zero emissions technology, right? Which is pretty exciting, for me. And I think about that every time I hear a truck idling outside my house or, something else, right? It's going to be nice. It's going to be nice for all of us, I think.
We've covered a lot in this episode, but one of the key points that both leaders spoke into is that despite a universal push for vehicles to become electric, there is still a great deal of research and fine-tuning needed to be done. We have to consider developing countries, and we also have to consider whether the footprint of manufacturing electric vehicles is as clean as it can be to make that transition worthwhile. Having said that, companies like ABB, Motiv, and Go Ahead Group serve as great examples for how possible the transition can be, and how the potential for this sector to have a positive impact on the world is actually quite exciting. If there was one vehicle I'd like to see go electric, it is without a doubt the 2003 Suzuki Jimny. I'm just going to put that out there and hope that something happens. But that's all that we have for today. We'd like to extend a huge thank you to Morten, Martin, and Jim for sharing their experience and innovation into the world of electric vehicles. For more insight into their journeys as leaders, check out our website. And to stay up to date on news happening around electrification, follow us on LinkedIn or sign up to our newsletter. Links can be found in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next month with more conversations with leaders from industries around the globe. This podcast is brought to you by Fine Light Media. Inspiring Industry is hosted and written by Danielle Champ, Produced and edited by Alex Cesare. Art and design, Charlie Prothero. Amy Jilks is our guest booking manager. Rain Cockburn, our head of marketing, and Rosie Clegg, our social media executive. Finally, we'd like to extend a special thanks to our magazine editor, Libby Hammond, and assistant editor, Mary Floate. The views, information, and opinions expressed during this episode are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Fine Light Media and its team.